What's up, Bulls Nation? Peck here from CHGO Bulls, alongside my guy, Big Dave. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe to our CHGO Sports YouTube channel. Very honored and excited today to be joined by one of the very best in the biz when it comes to talking NBA hoops, 10-year NBA vet, longtime ESPN TV analyst, as well as the co-host of our very own All-Cities All-NBA podcast with our guy, Adam Mares. You can follow him on Twitter at LegsESPN. The one and only Tim Legler joins us now to talk Bulls and NBA. Tim, what's going on, man?
What's up, gentlemen? I'm doing great, man. I'm doing great. Actually, I'm sitting here and I'm looking at you guys and I'm seeing that Bulls logo and I'm having some flashbacks to my playing career when I played 10 years in the league and I saw 6 of those years end in championships for that team. So that's like a little bit of post-traumatic stress for me, but that's okay.
Yeah, and quarter century later, the Bulls are still living off those glory years.
Yes.
We want to get your
Hey, listen, man, when you win 6 and 8 years, you can live for a long time off those glory years.
Long time.
I think some people within that organization believe in that a little too heavily. But we want to get your take on what's going on in the current Bulls universe. Tim, obviously with the departure of DeMar DeRozan after those 3 years and the arrival of Josh Giddey, Zach LaVine coming back from his surgery last season, Lonzo Ball even coming back to action, the Bulls focusing with this younger roster on playing a much more up-tempo pace than they have been the past few seasons and going from one of the lowest volume three-point shooting teams in the NBA to one of the highest through their first 7 games. What do you make of this drastic shift the Bulls are making, and do you think it's going to work out for them over the course of this season and moving forward?
I definitely think the approach was the only way to go with this roster makeup. I just think you got to play to your strengths. And I think, and look, they still have some guys that are kind of finding their way in terms of rounding into form after missing time. So they're not even close to really hitting their stride. And I think a team that could be tough to guard night to night. I love the approach. This is what the modern NBA looks like. I'll be honest with you. I made my living shooting threes, and it is sometimes hard for me as an analyst to watch games in which there's, 80 to 100 threes taken in a given night between the two teams. Like, it sometimes can feel a little bit monotonous almost, trip after trip after trip after trip. But I do think this Bulls team's personnel is suited to this style to give them the best chance to win. And I think that that's what they have done, and I think that's smart. You have to embrace what you have. DeMar DeRozan was not a guy that could have played in a style like this because of the way that he plays the game is different. As great as he is, as effective as he is as a scorer, this isn't something you could do with him. Looking at this personnel now and what you have and the number of guys that can shoot it, the number of guys that can get the ball and advance it quickly up the floor, I think pretty high IQ on this team. This is the way to play that gives you the best chance to win every night because this is not a loaded roster. Right. And if you try to just play traditional style basketball, you're going to have a difficult time winning in this league because the onslaught coming at you from the three-point line, the discrepancy there is just too much to overcome. So they've adapted to it. They've addressed it, and I think it gives them a better chance.
One of the guys that is a non-traditional kind of guy that they got is Josh Giddey. And he's kind of fit in really nicely with this team so far. What is your feeling on Josh Giddey here with the Bulls? And do you think he can be a foundational piece for this team?
Josh Giddey was a guy that I loved early on in Oklahoma City because you'd watch him and you'd go, physically, the numbers he's putting up, they don't match up with what he looks like physically, right? You're like, man, this guy must just be so strong and smart. And he's always one step ahead of the game, right? And his passing is what kind of stood out more than anything else. He's a great ball mover. He just facilitates and promotes ball movement and player movement because he gets it and it's very decisive where it's going next. That is very good to get guys to want to run harder, cut harder, because he's going to keep the ball flowing. That's what stood out to me in Oklahoma City. And then he'd have these big scoring nights some nights too. You're like, okay, man, this guy can really play. And then toward the end in Oklahoma City, his perimeter shot completely left the building. He had no faith in it. He had no belief in it. He had lost confidence. Teams weren't guarding him in the playoffs. They got him off the floor during the playoffs because of it. And so I didn't know where he was going to be mentally after that, even changing teams in a new environment. The bottom line is Chicago, it's a big market city, man. There's a lot of media coverage. Fans are into it. So there's like he's carrying some pressure with him of some failures offensively. And what I've seen is a guy that's closer to the version I really loved in Oklahoma City, more so than the guy that, you would look at the 15, 20 feet of space he had standing in the corner because they didn't have to guard him. And now there was a second guy in Shai Gilgeous-Alexander's lap because they weren't guarding Josh Giddey. And it was a problem for their offense. I'm seeing a guy that's closer to what he was at his best in OKC. And hopefully, I don't know how are the Chicago fans embracing Josh Giddey?
Well, I think maybe mediocre amount of hesitant optimism through 7 games.
That's a good way to put it.
It's the kindest way I can put it. But look, I'm curious what you think about the situation they are in, where we saw a whole bunch of guys from Josh Giddey's draft class get those extensions done at that deadline a couple weeks ago. Mm-hmm. The Bulls and Giddey did not come to terms on an extension, and Bulls fans are sitting here saying, man, there is a lot riding on what Josh Giddey looks like and how productive he is on the floor. Does he make the Bulls better when he's on the floor? Because we got to start talking about a Josh Giddey contract where he's looking for maybe 25, even close to 30 mil annually on a multi-year deal. Is he a good enough player to be a foundational piece with that kind of contract attached to it? And again, it's a small 7-game sample size, but right now, Giddey is the Bulls are plus 21 through 7 games with Giddey off the floor and a minus 52 with him on the floor. Does that concern you at all? Because some Bulls fans are worried about Giddey being a net positive player that the Bulls are going to hand a big contract to next spring and continue building with.
Yeah, so I'll just kind of expand upon what I was just saying about him. He's rebounded from his low point in Oklahoma City. He's definitely not in that place anymore. Having said that, there are still limitations with his game that to commit to that and lock into that to Josh Giddey is that in some way limit your ability to grow as a franchise and what you do with your roster going forward when he's not going to be a tipping point or a needle mover in terms of staying relevant in the Eastern Conference. That's probably my opinion on it. I would say no. I don't necessarily think that he is. Having said that, if you and I sat here right now and went around the league and looked at the number of guys making $25 million a year, you would be shocked at the list of names. That number doesn't mean what it did, certainly when I played, my goodness, but even what it did 10 years ago. There are so many guys making north of $20 million now that are just pieces in the machine, cogs in the machine. Nothing more than that. Solid players, not guys that are going to get you to the next place. I would probably put Josh Giddey in that category.
Well, there's another player that hasn't gotten a lot of love, from the national side of things, is Zach LaVine. He went from being a guy, a 2-time All-Star, to someone they couldn't even trade for a pack of gum. And now he feels like he's rebuilding not only his game, but also just his image. He has to rebuild at the same time. What do you feel about Zach? Is he still somebody the Bulls should be looking to trade off this team, or maybe hold on to him and see what he can do, because he still has a few years left on that contract?
Yeah, I know, man. I think it's going to be tough. You're right what you said about the rumor mill with Zach LaVine. I don't think I've ever heard a guy get thrown into more trade rumors for that long a period of time. It's like that I can remember. And it never happened. It never materialized. And it told you, no, either they were asking too much in return or the market just wasn't there for him, because obviously his name was floated out there in every possible scenario you could imagine. And other teams were looking at Zach LaVine and saying to themselves, all right, he provides something that teams do need. Like you're talking about a wing that can flat out score, and he can shoot the ball. He can play off of other stars because of his ability to catch and shoot. So he can morph into more that than a go-to guy if that's what he needed. And that's what teams were weighing, because you're not going to trade for Zach LaVine if you're a bottom half of the league team. You're not going. Why would you do that? You're only going to look at Zach LaVine if you're a contender and you think that's the final piece. More punch, more scoring power, and a guy that could play off of all stars we already have and do it comfortably. For whatever reason, nobody really got to that place where they were willing to give what the Bulls were asking to make that happen. So now here we go moving forward. It's an interesting scenario. Zach LaVine is 29 years old. So for me, right, 25 to 32 is your prime. Yeah. Those are the best years you typically have as an NBA player for a lot of reasons. He's right in the middle of that. but he's not a typical 29-year-old because of the injury history and some of the stuff he's dealt with. So I don't know that people view him that way. If you looked him up, some people might thought Zach LaVine's 32, 33 years old. He's been around forever. He's only 29. So you would think he still has another like 4 years in his wheelhouse as an elite level scorer. But we can all see he's taken a step back from what he was at his best. He has a contract that makes it tough to move. The market isn't necessarily there. It puts the Bulls in a very difficult spot. I think that was going to be the key piece to move if you really wanted to go to rebuild mode and just think about the future. They're in a weird place as an organization. They've got some young guys they're trying to develop. They've got veteran guys making a lot of money that maybe aren't what they once were. It's what I would describe as NBA purgatory. That's where the Bulls are. They're not a bottom feeder. Let's turn it all around. Let's tank it. Let's go for Cooper Flag. They're not there. And they're not a team that's relevant and really competitive or a problem for somebody in the Eastern Conference playoffs. They're in purgatory by NBA standards because of this strange mixture of players on their roster, and it's a very difficult thing to get out from under.
We love you, Tim Legler.
Thank you for saying that on our podcast, Tim Legler. I think some Bulls fans feel that way, and some Bulls fans feel like, hey, if this young team can make their way into the play-in and maybe win their way out of the play-in, the value of playoff experience for young players, and that argument, I hear that, but I think you look around and say no diss to Coby White or anyone else on this roster. The Bulls don't have that piece yet, and they're trying to kind of straddle this very, very difficult fence. But because I mentioned him, I'm curious what you think about Coby White, coming off of the near MIP winner last season, really elevating his offensive game with Zach LaVine missing a lot of time last year, playing well off of DeMar. Now DeMar's gone, and Bulls fans are wondering, can Coby White elevate his game to yet another level, maybe even flirt with an all-star nod? I think it will be hard to do without the defensive gravity that DeMar DeRozan attracted and allowed Coby to operate with over the last couple of years. But what do you think? Do you think that there is still room between where Coby is now and his ceiling?
To his credit, when they lost DeRozan, I thought, the quality of shots are going to be harder to generate for Coby White. So he's going to have a different kind of year. I love Coby White. I love his game. He's entertaining to me. He's pretty consistent. He shoots the ball at an efficient rate. And I was wondering if he was going to be able to maintain that, knowing that DeRozan's gone. We're not exactly sure what Zach LaVine's going to be. I don't love the other offensive pieces on this team. Does that mean more challenging possessions for Coby White, which means, hey, maybe he puts up the same numbers, but he shoots 40% from the field? Wouldn't be shocked if that was the case. I mean, look at a guy like Tyrese Maxey in Philly, right? So you don't have Embiid, you don't have Paul George to start the year. I love Tyrese Maxey. He's 46% shooter for his career. Guess what he shot beginning of the season without those two guys? 40%, because he's taking much more difficult shots than he should have to. And it's just natural for those percentages to decline. Coby White is still over 45% from the field. He's over 41% from the three-point line. His numbers is a slight uptick in scoring. Give him credit, because this has been an adjustment for him, higher profile on him, more crowded situations for him to operate in, and yet he's doing things very efficiently. So I actually think the best is yet to come for him this season. I think, it's always tougher at the start of a year. I think Coby White is a guy that I definitely would want on my team. He's part of the solution for the Bulls going forward, I think.
All right, Tim, let me get to why I really am glad that you're here. And I'm going to have 1,000 questions for you over the next, months that we are talking about your playing days and playing during that time. But I'll start with this one. You definitely played on one of my favorite teams, which was the Washington Bullets, when they had Rod Strickland, Chris Webber, Rasheed Wallace on that squad, Calbert Chaney as well. But I want to ask you is, what do you remember about the series against the Chicago Bulls in that first round when you all played and the Bulls kind of got them out of there pretty quickly? Even though trust me, I loved y'all team, but I'm a Bulls fan, bro. But I wanted to know what you remember about that series.
Couple things. First of all, I'll take you back to the year before that. So 95-96 season was my best year as a pro. I led the league in three-point shooting. I won the three-point shootout. I tore 3 ligaments in my knee, game 81 of that year. So I didn't come back until March of the following season. So March of 97. that's the year we played the Bulls in the first round. So I'd been back active for about a month, heavy brace on my leg. I still wasn't part of the rotation. So that's the first thing I remember, how disappointed I was that I barely played in that series because I wasn't even close to back from my injury. So that's first. Secondly, I remember we got swept 3 games. And if you go and look at the play-by-play of those 3 games, every one of those games was winnable with 3 minutes left. We gave the Bulls fits. But of course, they were an experienced team. They were a proven team. We were still trying to figure ourselves out. We gave them a hell of a series, even though it ended up 3-0. And then the final thing, I remember MJ dropping 50 plus in the first game. So I remember that pretty vividly. And sitting there, and Calbert Chaney was one of my close friends, teammate. He was our starting 2. One of the better defenders in the league at that spot, 6'7", strong as an ox, pogo stick legs. This dude was draped on Michael Jordan in that first playoff game, and Jordan still dropped 50. Like, you'll never see a guy play a guy better and had no effect on a player as Calvert Chaney did in that game. And it blew my mind, man. To sit there and be part of that and be on the court with that and sit there and witness that, that level, it's for me, it's why Michael Jordan in my lifetime he represents the greatest thing in terms of must-see TV this league has ever seen.
It's okay, Tim. There are a lot of players in your window of playing years that had MJ drop 50 on them.
Sir.
It's a club you should be honored to be a part of.
Hey, I always looked at it like this when I checked in the game to guard Michael. I always looked at it like this. I got nothing to lose. Everybody would be like, man, were you nervous guarding Jordan? I said, no, not at all, because he's not going to do anything to me he hasn't done to much better players. So I'm not worried about it at all. If he goes 0 for 3 in the 7 minutes I guard him, guess what? I might get a standing ovation checking out of the game. So I got nothing to lose. My issue would be if I'm going head-to-head with Steve Kerr and he busts me up for 15, now I got a problem. Now I'm probably going to get chewed out. I might not see the court in the second half. So I never looked at it like it was intimidation. I looked at it like this is an opportunity when you play guys on that level, man. Play them tough, play them hard, make them work for it. And if on that given night they happen to miss a few shots while you're guarding them, then it's a win-win.
All right, Tim, we'll get you out of here in a second, but just one quick one about the landscape of the East right now. Obviously, it looks like Boston might have a fellow juggernaut challenger in the Cleveland Cavaliers, who are just beating everybody. More curious to get your thoughts on 2 other what we're presuming contenders in Philly and Milwaukee, languishing in the bottom of the Eastern Conference standings right now. Which one of those 2 teams would you say it's a rocky start, but they'll get their together? And which of those 2 teams say, after the games you've watched of them, this team's actually in real trouble right now?
Milwaukee's got problems, without a doubt. And I know they just lost 2 games back to back, basically in the last minute of the game, up in the air against the Cavs, who are undefeated. So those are like, there is such thing as a quality loss. Those are those things. The problem I have is the issues that they had after Doc Rivers got there mid-season. And they went 17-19 the last 36 games of the year under Doc Rivers. Remember that. And, of course, they were all banged up in the playoffs. Giannis doesn't play. They get bounced by Indiana. So we were waiting to see this year. Let's fast forward. Giannis healthy. Lillard, year 2, probably more comfortable there. Now Doc's had a full off season to implement his stuff, his terminology, his philosophy and identity defensively, because their defense was a train wreck a year ago. And that's what they hung their hat on when they won a championship. And they took a massive step back. And they made that decision with Holiday and Lillard. Like, that's a conscious decision. We're going to be much worse defensively, but we might be so good offensively it won't matter. That's the risk that they took. What I'm worried about is there's been no improvement defensively with this team. And Lillard is playing better offensively than he was a year ago. They're still losing. I said going into the year, there were 2 teams I felt like it was imperative they get out of the gate quickly because of the narrative that's going to start, the chirping that's going to start, the constant dialogue, the mood in the locker room. And those 2 teams were Milwaukee because of all the changes last year, Doc and all that, and Lillard getting beat up a little bit, and Phoenix because it's Durant. They had an underwhelming year. They made a coaching change. bring in Boone. If either one of those teams got out of the gate like Milwaukee did, I'm like, that's going to be a problem. Internally, that's going to be a problem with the morale of the team and the negativity that's going to creep in. Phoenix is 6-1. They've answered the bell. Milwaukee's 1-6.
Mhm.
It couldn't have started worse for the Bucks. Now they don't have Chris Middleton. Okay, I get it. That's fine. I'm not even sure what Chris Middleton is anymore because he's missed so much time.
Exactly.
But the Bucks, to me, are the bigger issue because I think getting out of the gate was a nightmare for them because they've got their 2-star players playing well. They're still losing. Philadelphia doesn't have Embiid. They just got Paul George. Their best is definitely yet to come. Whenever that happens and Embiid gives them consistent playing time. The Philadelphia 76ers are still going to be something I think to deal with down the road. I'm more concerned about the Bucks.
Makes sense. And hey, if the Bucks turn out to be a dumpster fire, one fewer team, the Bulls have to fight for that play-in spot, right, Tim? Purgatory.
I like that thinking. That makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
Tim, we appreciate your time.
I got one more question for
Okay.
you, Tim. One more. You've done shows with our guy, Will Gottlieb, Will the Go Gottlieb, sir.
Oh, yeah.
As someone with amazing hair, when you look at Will the Go Gottlieb, on a scale of 1 to 10, where do you rank the quaff of Will Gottlieb, sir?
Will Gottlieb, he clearly takes a lot of time. He puts a lot of grooming into that. I'm sure he spends a lot of money on product. I bet the Amazon guys dropping off a box of that stuff on a weekly basis. That's fine. I will say, as a guy that I take pride too, I call this playoff hair I rocked for you guys today.
Yes, sir.
It is attentive and alert and ready to go. And I think I put Will in that same category. It matters, it matters.
The Go can maybe one day dream
to
be in the Legler category.
Yes, sir, man.
Of people who talk about basketball and have great hair.
That's a heck of a level.
Again, Legs, we appreciate it, man. Even though you're a Commanders fan, we're going to let that slide for today. We look
Appreciate
forward to our next chat. Bulls Nation, make sure you subscribe to ALLCITY's All NBA Podcast channel on YouTube. You can find it in that related channel section of our CHGO Sports YouTube channel's homepage with our guy Adam Mars over there in DNVR. Also, recurring appearances from the one and only Mark Stein added to the fold this season. Legs, you and Mars and that crew are doing a great job. I listen every episode. Love what you guys do. Bulls Nation, you will too. And of course, you can follow him on that Twitter machine, Legs ESPN. Timothy, a pleasure.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate you guys.
Yes, sir.
We all silly like the mayor.